Hey guys, Chase back with a brand new video, and today I'm going to be talking about the problem of evil. And seeing as I'm no longer a Christian anymore, I don't believe in these traditional notions of good and evil and how they're created by a God and that they're grounded in a God. But I'm going to be stepping back into that Christian worldview, and I'm going to be showing how within this worldview, this view is inconsistent. And so there's a few different ways to attack the problem of evil. Some people appeal to emotions and they say, look at all these terrible things that happen. How could God do this? Some people look at natural evils and they say, look at all the hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanoes in the world that kill people. How could a loving God create this type of world? But the type of evil, or the problem of evil that I want to be looking at today is the logical problem of evil. And so that has a traditional argument that I'm actually going to change. And so the traditional argument for the logical problem of evil is this. Premise one is that with an all-loving, all-powerful, all-knowing God, evil cannot exist. Premise two is that evil exists, and then therefore the conclusion is an all-knowing, all-powerful, all-loving God does not exist. Now, I think that there is an issue with premise 1 and 2, and it's that it uses the phrasing evil existing. Now, I think that you can create a somewhat compatible worldview with just evil existing, and people build those worldviews through, the suffering of this world doesn't compare to the next. God gave us free will, therefore humans can act any way they want to. They can be good or evil, and free will is a necessity, because without free will, then everyone is just robots wandering around. They can't truly love God. Some people say that suffering is necessary in order to refine us into certain people. Taking examples of disobedient children and parents correcting them, yes, it does cause suffering for the child, but it's for the better because it builds character and it corrects them onto the right path, right? The logical argument for evil that I want to present and that I'm going to be focusing on and talking about today is this. Premise one. An all-loving, an all-powerful, and all-knowing God cannot be responsible for evil. Premise 2, God is responsible for evil. Therefore, conclusion, an all-loving, all-powerful, all-knowing God does not exist. And now I want to defend those premises. And so the way to defend those premises is I have to show that God is responsible for evil. And I want to make a distinction here, okay? I'm not going to be appealing to emotional arguments in this, okay? I am going to use instances such as rape or maybe murder, but these are not going to be emotional appeals because God has deemed these things as evil in the Christian worldview, right? So if I say that God is responsible for rape, while yes, emotionally, it is a very terrible thing. If God is responsible for rape, then it logically follows that this God is not loving because this God has deemed rape to be evil, okay? So I have two different arguments that I want to share. And the first is what I call the responsibility of the bystander. And I have a few different scenarios to run through. The first scenario is, let's say we have a mother and a daughter at a pool, and the daughter is walking way too close to the pool, and let's say she's about 2 years old, never been to swimming lessons, can't swim, okay, she doesn't have floaties on. She's walking too close to the pool, and she slips, and she falls right into the pool, and the mother is watching her daughter, looking directly at her, watches her fall into that pool. Well, the mother sits there, she crosses her arm, she looks down at the pool, her child's at the bottom, obviously drowning, and the mother says, well, my child has free will. Therefore, I can't jump in that water and intervene. I can't save her life. I would be taking away her free will if I jumped in the water and saved my daughter. So, I can't intervene. I'm going to let my daughter just drown. Now, any normal person would look at this scenario and say, the mother is 100% responsible for neglecting her child, for the murder of her child, right? That mother should be charged with murder. And this is the responsibility of the bystander, right? And I think that this is a critique of the argument of free will, right? God gives people free will, therefore God can't intervene in the evil that people do or the evil that happens. And this is a scenario of a child falling into a pool, but let's look at a different scenario. Okay, let's say we have a cop, and this cop is driving around town. He's doing his normal patrols, right? And he's got his window down, and he hears somebody calling out for help, a woman calling out for help. And so he pulls up, and he turns, and he looks down this alleyway. And there he sees a man on top of a woman, clearly raping her. And this woman's crying out, screaming, "Help me, help me, help me, please, somebody help me." And the officer is just sitting there, looking. He calls on his radio. He says, well, I can't really do anything in this scenario. Both those people have free will. I can't stop it, that evil that's happening. And then he just keeps driving. Would you not say that the cop is in some way responsible for that rape going on? Like, the officer could have gotten out and stopped it and helped that woman. But the officer chose not to. And this is the responsibility that I believe that God would have under this Christian worldview, right? Even though God has given free will, it is not stripping people of their free will to step in and help them with evil. Okay, just you wouldn't say that a police officer jumping in to stop a rape is taking away the free will of the people involved. You wouldn't say those people no longer have free will, or the child who fell in the pool. You wouldn't say that the mother is stripping the child of their free will and therefore should not jump into the water and save them. Right? That's ridiculous. And see, this is the issue, because in the Christian worldview, there's an all-knowing. Okay, so God sees all the evil. God sees the rape. God sees the child falling in the pool. All-powerful, has the ability to take the child out of the water, to stop the rape. And then all-loving, which means hates and despises evil. And yet just lets it happen. See, in this scenario, God is responsible for the evil, because God doesn't stop it. God knows it's there. God has the ability to stop it, but doesn't. And it's not interfering with free will. It's not taking away people's free will, okay? And I don't think you can make the argument that these instances of suffering are necessary to building character or developing you as a human being to become who God wants you to be, right? I don't think you can make that argument. And the reason is because certain types of suffering are deemed okay in the Bible, right? Like Proverbs talks about how it is a good thing to set your child on the right path. When they're disobedient, it is a good thing to correct them. Now, Jesus says to love your neighbor, right? And you can make the argument that correcting your child is loving them. Even though it causes suffering, it is loving them, it is doing what's best for them. Raping is in no way, shape, or form loving your neighbor. And supposedly God has the ability to stop it, but God chooses not to. Therefore, either this God does not exist, or this God is an evil monster. Now, maybe this argument isn't convincing to you, and if it's not, I would love to know why in the comments. I would love to have a discussion with you and talk about possible objections, because maybe there's something I'm not seeing. But now I want to throw in a second argument that I think is pretty much irrefutable, because it in no way, shape, or form affects free will. It does not interfere with people's lives in any way. It does not have God coming down and taking control of anything. This is the problem of all knowing. See, God knows everything, right? God knows everything that has happened. God knows everything that is happening. God knows everything that will happen. But there's a major issue when you're looking at the problem of evil. And the issue is, why doesn't God tell people things in order to prevent or stop evil? God doesn't tell people things. So here's a scenario, right? Imagine you have a little boy in a church who's being molested by a youth pastor. Okay? Why would God, who knows that this is happening, not just tell all of the people in the church, right? Tell the pastor, tell the elders, tell the congregation, communicate through the Holy Spirit that supposedly exists, right? Just say, hey, the youth pastor is molesting a small child. You need to step in and stop it and confront them and get rid of this evil, right? I mean, are you going to say, honestly, that God is willing to look at the molestation of a child and say, this is for their character development? I'm using this to allow them to become who they're supposed to be. That's evil, right? Under the Christian worldview, that is evil. I mean, to use rape, something that God defines as evil, to use rape as a means to an end is evil, right? No question about it. This God is evil. There's no way around that. Not only does God know what's going on in the present moment, but God supposedly knows what's going to happen in the future, right? God is all-knowing, knows all possible scenarios that could happen within this framework of free will, right? And so let's say you have a scenario of, if a person drives home a certain way, they're going to be hit and killed by a drunk driver. Or let's make it even worse, their 3 children are going to be killed by a drunk driver. Okay? Why would God not just tell the mother, don't drive home that way? And even confirm that with other people. Like, hey, have the husband call, hey, I just had this feeling, like, I feel like God was telling me, hey, don't drive home that way. And then the wife could be like, yeah, I got the same thing, right? They don't drive home that way, and the 3 children are saved, right? And it's like, are you going to say that God murdering these 3 children as a means to an end to develop character is okay? I mean, how do you justify that within the Christian worldview? Right? God should not use things that he deems as evil as a means to an end. And it is God using them because God is able to prevent them if he is all-loving, all-knowing, all-powerful. So I think that this is a much more compelling argument as opposed to just evil existing, but demonstrating that the things that God deems as evil are things, if he exists, that he is using for a means to an end. And if God is using these things as a means to an end, that means that God is responsible for evil. Therefore, God is not all-loving. If you want to get rid of all knowing, you have to say that God experiences time with us and therefore does not know that things are going to happen. If you're going to say that God's not all knowing, that just negates the entire Bible. How would God know about prophecies or anything that's going to happen? And lastly, I just want to represent my argument. My argument is premise 1: an all-knowing, all-powerful, all-loving God cannot be responsible for evil. Premise 2: God is responsible for evil. Therefore, conclusion: an all-loving, all-powerful, all-knowing God does not exist. If you are a Christian, or even if you're an atheist, and you see some flaws in my argument, you have ways to solve these issues, I would love to know. Please leave your thoughts down in the comments below. I would love to have a discussion with you. I try to reply to all comments, even if it sometimes takes me a while. I always try to respond. So yeah, let me know what you think about these arguments, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.